Today we are going to discuss about physiology of the cornea. So this is basically contact lens and cornea series, and I'll talk about physiology as far as I can know. I can tell you. Okay. So corneal physiology, yes, biochemical composition. Cornea is definitely heterogeneous. Normal condition around 78 to 80% water, and solid 20%. In 20%, 19.8% is inorganic matter, and 0.2%, sorry, organic matter. In 0.2% it's inorganic salts. So in this table, which is very good table, so water content is around 72 to 78% of total, or approximately 78%. Yes, good. And what role of that water? Water, it actually maintains transparency, allowing nutrient to diffuse and contribute to corneal hydration, and definitely for the refractive index of the cornea. And collagen, as we know, the highest percentage of collagen is type 1 collagen, approximately 15%, and provide the tensile strength. Definitely, collagen provide tensile is strength naturally, and maintains the corneal shape. Obviously, support for the transparency, the collagen, the arrangement of the collagen fiber. Yes, the other proteins and peptides is 5%, includes the enzymes like uh, aldehyde dehydrogenase and albumin and crystallines and regulatory peptides involvement in stress response and transparency. And proteoglycans and glycosaminoglycans is isn't it very important, whenever we are talking about transparency. So which is approximately 3 to 5%. So keratin sulfate and chondroitin and dermatin sulfate, this on proteoglycan regulates the corneal hydration, which is very important. Organize collagen fibrils and maintain the spacing for the transparency, which is very important. We will definitely going to talk about it in transparency too. Lipids around less than 1% and present mostly in the epithelium and endothelial cells membrane and helps for the barrier functions. Yes, salts, electrolytes was approximately 1% of total weight, mainly sodium, potassium, and chlorine maintains the osmotic balance and cell membrane potentials. And other solids less than 1% include glucose, amino acids, and vitamins. So antioxidants and growth factors and metabolic and wound healing. These are the functions of these other solutes. Okay. So let's go one by one layer. So epithelium, approximately 70% of the epithelium is made by water, and protein synthesis, which is 5 times higher than the stroma and 2 times higher than the endothelium and descendants membrane for protein synthesis in epithelium. Yes, epithelium is actually highest metabolic activity is happening in epithelium. And lipids are possible lipids and cholesterols, enzyme necessary for glycolysis and Krebs cycles. Yes, sodium, potassium, and activates the ATPase, acetylcholine, cholesterase, and the electrolytes in these concentrations. So let's move further. Stroma, yes, the highest water content is here, which is 75 to 80%. Collagen, obviously here, 15% of the total stroma. So mucopolysaccharides, basically chondroitin, keratin, and keratin sulfate, and other proteins like albumin, glycoproteins, enzymes, and matrix metalloproteins. And we're definitely going to, we have definitely, there are a lot of things to need to address when you are going to deal with wound healing. It's quite a complicated topic, I think, wound healing, and there are electrolytes too. So descending membrane collagens are high, which is 73%, and glycoproteins, collagens are insoluble and extremely resistant to chemical and enzyme. That's why whenever there is total slog off of the stroma, even that condition, deciment membrane remains strongly there, remains there for protection of eye glove and forms decimated cells, isn't it? So endothelium enzymes for the glycolysis and Krebs cycles, because endothelium is also highly active metabolically. So let's talk about the transparency, which is very hit topic in case of corneal physiology, isn't it? In corneal physiology, there is two hit topics. One is corneal transparency, and another is corneal hydration. So basically, to maintain the cornea relatively dehydrated state. These are the two main topics. Yeah, obviously, these two topics are uh, obviously correlated with one another, and definitely there is common theme there, but yes, these two topics are very common. So corneal transparency, primarily physiological function of the cornea. So basically what it does to act as a powerful refracting lens. If cornea is transparent, yes, then we want its refracting lens, and to protect intraocular content. If cornea, we penetrate the cornea, then definitely intraocular content are not protected. And absorption of topical drop, obviously topical drop, main route of absorption obviously in intraocular is through the cornea. And corneal transparency is a key factor to all these functions. Basically, cornea, we need cornea to be transparent. So factor affecting the corneal transparency are anatomical factor and physiological factor. So there the physiological factor, we talk about corneal hydration, but anatomical factor we talk about basically tear film and corneal epithelium and arrangement of the stromal lamella. In that particular case, we will definitely talk about the Morris theory and Goldman theory on the stromal lamella, how they are arranged, and this basically these theories are very important in case of examination in a lot of cases. And then we will talk about corneal avascularity, because cornea must be avascular, otherwise cornea cannot be transparent, isn't it? So we will definitely go to corneal vascularization theory as in all these things. And absence of myelination and nerve lymphatics. If cornea has myelinated nerve, then cornea would be um, less transparent, isn't it? So that's why we have different factors for the for cornea to be transparent, and it's very important as a student that you understand every factor, and then you can write in your exam and you can explain in your viva. It's very important. What are the role of tear and corneal epithelium? What are the role of element of the lamella, stromal lamella? What are the role of corneal avascularity, and how this avascularity is maintained, and what are the role of corneal actually corneal nerve fiber doesn't have myelination sheet, which is very important. And another very important crucial factor is corneal hydration, how cornea maintains its hydration. And what if it cannot maintain the hydration, then cornea becomes uh, translucent, not transparent. And then yes, so these are the factors that are very crucial whenever we understand the cornea to be transparent. So that's why you try to understand each and every point, and then you try to think about it. And whenever we do anything, whether intended or whether by the lack of anything, then we lose the transparency. So one of the thing that contact lens, if it is hypoxia, we create hypoxic condition, the transparency is compromised. So that's why we wanted to know, so what are the factors that are actually hampering the corneal transparency, because one of the factors can be contact lens overwear or contact lens pathology. So we want to know the corneal physiology so well. Okay, so anatomical factor and physiological factor for maintaining the corneal transparency. Let's move further. So tear film and corneal epithelium. What do you mean by that? So precorneal tear film fills the irregularity of the cornea. Basically, healthy tear film fills the irregularity of the cornea, and homogeneous refractive index of epithelium. So basically, if epithelium maintain its homogeneity. So and another great thing is epithelium has tight intracellular junction, desmosomes and macula occludens, so that uh, it's actually the barrier, it acts as a barrier, because see, it is epithelium and water from the tear do not flux into the cornea. So that's very important. If corneal epithelium is homogeneous refractive index, it maintains or not, and its intercellular junction is tight or not. Okay, so arrangement of the stromal lamella, then we will come to basically transparency theory of transparency in basically related to stromal lamella, isn't it? So lamella, so one of the famous theory and one of the correct theory, I think, is a Morris theory. Morris theory is postulated in 1957. Uniform collagen fibrils are arranged in regular lattice so that the scattering of light is destroyed by the destructive interference. I think you know this destructive interference, context constructive interference, basically in ARC, isn't it? So in spectacle ARC. So, so fibrils are arranged in a regular lattice so that the scattering, which is backward scattering, is destroyed by the destructive interference. So interfibril distance should be less than the wavelength of the light, which is approximately this, isn't it? So loss of transference result if the regular arrangement is altered. So there is a regular arrangement in stromal lamella. If that altered because of the edema or whatever, then transparency is lost. That's the theory of that theory is Morris theory. So basically, this is normal condition, isn't it? Normal uniform arrangement of corneal theory. So which is basically spacing are normal and uniform arrangement. But if that lost, then loss of loss of uniformity in fibrillar spacing. That's so there is a spacing is basically it's varied, isn't it? Isn't it? Space is varied. That's why it's the loss of uh, transparency, so stromal edema. So another theory is Goldman et al. Theory. So it's based on the diffraction. So lattice arrangement is not important for this theory, but the fibrils are what is important is fibrils are small in relation to light, and until and unless they do not interfere with the transmission of light, unless they are larger than half of the wavelength of light. So the fibril must be small, and so that they do not interfere with the they do not interfere with the light diffraction. Okay, so that's the concept. Basically fibril size must be small, and otherwise if there is some conditions that if fibril size get larger, then the Goldman theory is problematic with that particular condition. So to confirm this theory, they found the legs areas devoid with of collagen with the dimension greater than 2000 angstrom in swollen and non-transparent human cornea. The similar leg can be found around the keratocytes and edematous human cornea. However, this theory fails to explain rapid clouding of the cornea with increase in IOP and clearing with a decrease in IOP. This is one of the failure of Goldman-Rettel theory. Okay, why there is a rapid clouding when increase of IOP, and why there is a rapid rearrangement of clearing of clouding when IOP decreases. So another theory we have to discuss is cornea is avascular. That's why cornea is transparent, and how cornea maintains that avascularity. So vascularity in cornea occurs that defend from the noxious agent and facilitate nutrition and transport of the drug. Basically, if there is injury and cornea has to be healed, then but at that particular case, vascularity is there, isn't it? Like corneal ulcer or anything else. But the harmful for the transparency of the cornea, isn't it? If cornea is vascularized, then definitely cornea is uh, non-transparent. So that's why cornea try to maintain its avascularity so that it can be transparent, isn't it? So the theory of vascularity is basically chemical theory and the mechanical theory. So chemical theory is vaso-inhibitory factors, isn't it? So avascularity in the cornea is due to vaso-inhibitory factors. So stromal glycosaminoglycans prevent the vascular invasion. So basically mere from self. So this is discarded. Basically these things are not there. They discarded. And another is vasostimulatory factors. What are the vasostimulatory factors? The substance released by injury at a site and diffuse through the stroma to the limbus and stimulate the vascularization from the limbal plexus. So hypoxia of the corneal epithelium stimulate the vascularization by activating vasostimulating factors. So that's very important. That's why when we see the injured cornea, when you see the hypoxic cornea, at that particular case, maybe secondary to contact lens, particular case, there is a vascularization in the periphery. Early scenario, there is a vascularization in the periphery of the cornea. So it's because of hypoxia, and that hypoxia actually stimulates the vasostimulating factors. Mechanical theory given by Cohen. So compact structure of the cornea prevents the vascularization. That's the mechanical theory. Okay, loosening due to the edema. Whenever there is edema means there is a lot of water, and that means there is a space, spacing there is between, what do you call that, collagen, isn't it? So that's why loosening due to the edema causes the new vascularization. Basically mechanical theory means there is a compact cornea is there, no space for the vascularization. But whenever there is edema, it means that there is a space for the vascularization. So however, vascularization is not seen in many edematous cases such as Fuchs dystrophy and aphakic bullous keratopathy. That's another theory. That's another thing, that if there is edema, there must be vascularization. That's not the point. Yes. Okay. So combined mechanical and chemical theory by Morris. So both the release of vasostimulating factor and the loosening of compact corneal stroma by edema required for the new vasculature, and that's a quite logical theory, isn't it? Yes. So the final good topic is corneal hydration. So it's very very fantastic topic, and I love the topic. Corneal hydration is very important in case of contact lens practitioner, contact lens, because of that corneal hydration and contact lens directly affect corneal hydration. So normal cornea maintain itself the relative state of dehydration, as I have already told about you what is the relative state of dehydration. So approximately 80% of water, the highest amount of all connective tissue in the body. So cornea has highest amount of water content. To keep constant by balancing factor. It's not like that cornea do not have that capacity to move above the 80, but cornea maintains that hydration approximately to 80. That's what the relative state of hydration. To keep constant by balancing factors which draw the water into the cornea, which prevents the flow of water in cornea, or which draws the water from the out of the cornea. So basically means if this is a cornea, some water come into the cornea, some water goes out of the cornea, and actually cornea maintains it by throwing water out of the cornea, isn't it? And throwing water out of the cornea, the one of the main structure which is responsible is corneal endothelium pump mechanism, isn't it? Yes. So factors affecting corneal hydration, these are the five factors, is very important. Sometimes it came into the exam like a long question, and you have to write all the five uh, points. Okay, it's very important. One is stromal swelling pressure, and definitely it's going directly correlated with IOP. Another is barrier function of epithelium and endothelium. Another is the elephant of the room, as I've already told you, elephant of the room, which means the very important is active pump mechanism at endothelium, evaporation from the corneal surface. Yes, IOP is directly correlated with the stromal swelling pressure. Let's discuss about it. So stromal swelling pressure, what do you mean by that? The pressure exerted by glycans for the corneal stroma, which is approximately, what do you mean by pressure exerted by gags? It means gags are negatively charged, and both two negatively charged gags are actually repulsion of each other, and that's what it creates a negative pressure. That's the pressure. Okay, pressure exerted by gags 60 mm of Hg and generates the level of intrafebrile tension, and that's why gags remain in the intrafebrile, and then the two gags, let's example, that's two gags repulse each other, okay, work against each other. So imbibition pressure, which means the negative pressure generated due to the electrostatic repulsion of anionic charge of gags. That's what I'm talking about, and that expand the tissue and sucks the fluid. That's the concept. Okay, so it expand the tissues and sucks the fluid. So basically it creates the negative pressure, and then what do you mean by negative pressure? It sucks the water, isn't it? So that's the stromal swelling pressure. It's good that there is a stromal swelling pressure, but it's not good that it sucks all the water from the echoes or from the tear. It's not good, not at all. Okay, so this is the formula that imbibition pressure is IOP minus SP. I'm not going to talk about it now, but just remember this formula. I'm going to talk about it in IOP section. Okay, imbibition pressure is IOP minus SP. So totally imbibition pressure is approximately 40 to 45. Okay, so what does it means is corneal transference relies on the precise balance between its innate swelling pressure and the functional endothelial pump. Basically, swelling pressure, it means what? It helps for swelling, and at the same time, what do you mean by endothelium pump? It helps to remove the water, isn't it? So stromal swelling pressure is approximately 55 to 60. It's MCQ question. Just remember this. This is MCQ question. It's generated by the repulsive force between the negative charged glycosaminoglycans. I have already told you, which naturally draws the fluid. So glycosaminoglycans, which is negative charged, repel each other, and that repelling force create the swelling pressure. What does it means? It means they help to draw the water, and this is actively counteracted by endothelium pump. Basically, endothelium pump does what? It removes water from the cornea, which constantly remove fluid and maintain optimum hydration level approximately 78%. So that's why we call it as a relatively dehydrated state. At this hydration, the collagen fibrils are arranged in a perfectly regular lattice and allow the light to pass through the pass through without scattering. And what is this without scattering? Perfect lattice, isn't it Morris theory? Yes. If the endothelium pump fails, remember, if the endothelium pump fails, the fluid enters the stroma and hydration increases. Yes, that's the because two things are counteractive. One is swelling pressure. It helps to draw the water in. Another thing is endothelium pump mechanism. It removes the water out. It's removing out, it's drawing in. And one of the thing goes up, there is swelling. If stromal pressure goes up, way up, there is swelling. If endothelium pump mechanism goes down, there is swelling, isn't it? So swelling, so hydration increase and swelling pressure drops. This disrupts the collagen lattice scatter. So basically, this is disrupts the collagen lattice pattern and scattering of the light and making cornea cloudy. Isn't it a Morris theory? Yes. So another point of view is barrier function of epithelium and endothelium. So what is the barrier function? Basically means from epithelium, so let's say from epithelium there is a water of tear, isn't it? It prevents tear to come in. From endothelium there is a aqueous, isn't it? In the below endothelium, so it prevents water from the echoes to be sucked in into the cornea. So semi-permeable in nature, barrier to excessive flow of water and electrolyte in stroma. Basically, epithelium is good barrier resistance than endothelium. Yes, it's written. Epithelium is twice as resistance as endothelium. Is always important. Epithelium is good resistance than endothelium. Endothelium is quite leaky. Yes, though it though it does the barrier functions too. Endothelium. So active pump mechanism. So what are we talking here? Active pump mechanism is like I have already told you what is active pump mechanism. It's elephant in the room. So what is that? So active pump mechanism is mainly in endothelium. Yes, due to the leaky channel in the endothelium, barrier function is incomplete. I have already told you the barrier function is complete. Good barrier function is in epithelium. So sodium potassium ATPase pump system is there. So that's why active, isn't it? Active means you need energy to function that particular system. So sodium hydrogen pump system, bicarbonate is independent ATPase and carbonic anhydrase enzyme is also there, which is very important. So beside the passive ion movement is also occur, which is passive means no energy is required, which is potassium, chlorine, and hydrocarbon in aqueous and potassium, chlorine, and hydrocarbon in cornea. These are also passively they can move. So one of the good thing that I have taken this picture from Efron, I think third edition. So one of the good thing that I have noticed in this picture, and I want to explain it. See, there is a membrane potential change. There is this equation, yes, and carbonic anhydrase is very much useful in this equation, particularly CO2 plus H2O to making uh, hydrogen and carbonic. Uh, so basically, this hydrocarbon goes out, and along with it, it takes water out from the endothelium. That's the final product, roughly. Okay, so I'll definitely talk about it in the table section. So this is the concept, which is very important concept. Is active pump mechanism means using energy, using energy with using ATP. It draws water out from cornea. That's the concept. And whenever we prevent uh, passing oxygen from the atmosphere through contact lens, let's discuss with the contact lens. So whenever contact lens is a culprit which prevent oxygen, then production of ATPase actually reduce, isn't it? Because in aerobic approximately 36 ATPase formation, in anaerobic approximately 2 ATPase formation. Rough idea, I'm not biochemist, but rough idea. So if energy goes down, ATPase goes down, then endothelial pump mechanism fails, and that's why cornea swells. That's the basic function. Yes. So evaporation of water from the corneal surface. is basically increased concentration of the fluid, increased osmolarity relative to the cornea, and hypertonicity draws the water from the cornea. Isn't it? That's why we use 5% sodium chloride in Fuchs dystrophy or whatever when we see the cornea is swelled. That's hypertonicity, isn't it? So evaporation of the water from the cornea is another mechanism where cornea maintains its state of relative dehydration. It's just like simple thing, evaporation. So during awake, evaporation rises the osmolarity tiers and more water is drawn from the cornea. So in waking the cornea, more water is drawn from the cornea. And during sleep, lid are closed, so evaporation decrease, osmolarity decrease, and less water is drawn from the cornea, isn't it? So patient complains of blur due to edema on the awakening, like in case of fixed dystrophy, not normal patients. Normal patient is completely okay. Yes, cornea swells approximately 4% every day when we sleep, and then it will come back to normal within 1 hour of awakening. So IOP, when IOP exceed the swelling pressure of the stroma, then epithelium edema occurs. What do you mean by that? It means by say swelling pressure is here in stroma due to negative charge of glycosaminic glycans and they repulse each other. Okay, that's why water draws uh, into the what do you call it, into the cornea. But at the same time, endothelial cells remove water out, isn't it? Whenever IOP at aqueous humor, obviously IOP means it's everywhere, but in aqueous humor, whenever there is a push from IOP, just remember there is a push from IOP. IOP is pushing. Then can't you think that endothelium cells pushing out water is difficult because to push out against that high pressure. So that's the concept. So it's pushing that water out from the endothelium is difficult, and again endothelium is leaky, and then drawing that particular aqueous humor water from aqueous humor towards the stroma is easier, and that swelling pressure uh, whenever exceed that IOP, then epithelium get edematous, even stroma get edematous, isn't it? So let's discuss again with the few tables. I'm excited with the table. Okay, just let's discuss in a gross rough idea. So atmosphere oxygen in tear film open. In that particular case, primary oxygen source for the normal condition, isn't it? For the cornea, atmosphere, whenever we our eye, so tear film has 155 mm of HgO2 tension at the sea level, so which is very high. And whenever we close our eye, then palpebral vasculature, that's very important source for our uh, source for oxygen in a closed eye condition, isn't it? So oxygen source in the closed eye condition is palpebral vasculature. Is very important you understand this concept, and whenever there is MCQ, just try to tick on the palpebral vasculature and don't tick on aqueous humor. Yes, aqueous humor is also the source, but palpebral vasculature are a little bit greater source. So 55 of mm the agitation in the corneal thickness increases approximately 4 to 5% overnight, but it returns to the baseline in 1 hour. I have already told you it's normal. So aqueous humor, secondary oxygen source and main source for glucose and amino acid. That's important. See, aqueous humor is secondary source for the oxygen, but main source for glucose and amino acid. It is always come in MCQ. So oxygen tension is approximately 30 to 40 vegetation and low tier glucose versus aqueous humor. Okay, so perilimbal vasculature also supplies especially for mainly for corneal periphery. So glycogen storage present in all corneal cells and break up during the metabolic stress. That's another thing. And oxygen flux is total corneal oxygen flux is 6 microliter per centimeter square per hours, and layer glucose consumption ratio is highest in definitely in epithelium, and then second stroma, and then third endothelium. So basically corneal epithelium is highly metabolically active. Okay, so this is the aerobic pathway and anaerobic pathway, and I'm going to discuss here too also, which is what are the important points that we have to discuss. See, anaerobic glycolysis, it's very funny that people optometry students don't know that main pathway for the cornea is anaerobic pathway. It's quite 85% of glucose metabolism happen anaerobically. That's quite surprising though. If you are not reading well, just try to emphasize it. 85% of the glucose metabolism is actually happening in anaerobically in cornea. Just remember this thing, okay? So, what is that pathway is? Basically, glucose breakdown in pyruvic acid and then it breakdown in lactic acid, isn't it? So, in anaerobic glycolysis, only roughly 2 ATPs per glucose and is dominant in epithelium and stroma. That's quite surprising for this student. So basically means 85% is done in uh, anaerobic pathway. So aerobic pathway is very less, so approximately 15% or less than that. So aerobic oxidation, which is Krebs cycle, is highly in endothelium. Why? Because endothelium needs greatest energy demand for to functions the pump mechanism, isn't it? So use 36 ATPs per glucose. Obviously, a rough idea is 36 ATPs per glucose, but it's high demand in endothelium because endothelium is pump mechanism, isn't it? So whenever we introduce contact lens and there is less oxygen in cornea, then what happens? This aerobic mechanism sort of, isn't it? This mechanism sort of, then from 85% it moves aerobic anaerobic glycolysis like 100%, isn't it? And whenever there is a 100% anaerobic glycolysis, then what happens? Basically means that means hypoxia, and then it means osmotic load increases. Why? It means the byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis is lactic acid, isn't it? And whenever there is a lactic acid accumulation in the stroma, then what do I mean by that? It means increase in is osmotic load. And what do I mean by that? It means stromal edema. And that's the process of edema, isn't it? Corneal edema secondary to contact lens. So basically, lactic acid waste is diffused across the endothelium into the anterior chamber. Yes. So basically, what do you mean by that? It means by cornea predominantly use anaerobic pathway and a little bit aerobic pathway. And whenever you block that aerobic pathway through contact lens, obviously contact lens material, then what happens? All the energy needed for the cornea is responsible of anaerobic pathway. Anaerobic pathway, first it cannot produce good amount of ATP, then endothelium functions compromise. Another point, the aerobic anaerobic glycolysis has byproduct of lactic acid. And what lactic acid does? It does increase the osmotic load of cornea. And what do you mean by increasing osmotic load? It means it draws water from aqueous humor towards the stroma because accumulation of lactic acid is basically highest in posterior stroma, and then water draws from aqueous humor towards the posterior stroma. So that's why you see corneal edema, especially in the posterior side of the cornea. Why? Because anterior side of the cornea is highly compact with the collagen fiber, isn't it? That's what we are talking about. The posterior collagen, posterior half, one two third of the cornea, especially stroma, is less compact. That's why accumulation of lactic acid is there high, and that's why water drawn from, because of the osmotic pressure, water drawn from aqueous to that particular area of the cornea, and then cornea is swelled. So that's why we see cornea swelling clearly in the posterior cornea and as compared to anterior cornea. So that's the game. Okay, so that's the game. So contact lens wear or the closed reduced tear side. So stromal swelling or edema overnight swelling partly from the tear film tonicity too. So that's the game of actually physiologically. So another difference between a rough discussion on the theory of Morris theory and Goldman theory is rough discussion, not that clearly. The core concept is due to the destruction of interference, scattered light because a regular lattice arrangement. That's very important. Regular lattice. Wherever, in case of Goldman theory, Goldman-Bacon theory is basically minimum light is scattered due to collagen fiber are very small. Okay, so requirement for the transparency is what is required for according to Morris theory is highly regular or periodic spacing. For Goldman, the fibril diameter and spacing should be half of the wavelength of the light. Mechanism of light control is coherent destruction of light, which is weak incoherent scattering in case of Goldman. So disruptive effect is any irregularity in the lattice break, it will create haze and opacity. Sorry, it will create the destructive interference in low level. Any increase in fibril size or spacing will create a scattering in Goldman theory. So these are the things, and we have seen evidence in X-ray patterns and also. But definitely, Morris theory is more accepted than Goldman theory. So now again, there are a few things that I want to discuss. I think that it's last slide. Yes, it's last slide. So let's discuss about it. So transparency level is corneal transparency is definitely greater than 90% of the incident light under normal condition is way up than 90%. So corneal structure is typically connective tissue, primary collagen and proteoglycans. So challenge is collagen proteoglycan arrangement in the arrangement could scatter the light and loss of transparency. That's why arrangement is matter. Arrangement matters, isn't it? That's Morris theory. So mechanism of transparency is stromal collagen organization and the small diameter and regular separation of the collagen fiber. That's what we are talking about. So what happens when diameter is controlled incorporated minor collagen? This I have already talked about type 5 collagen, isn't it? So proteoglycans, what that proteoglycans does? The family of glycoproteins, protein core plus glycosaminoglycans chains. So small leucine rich proteins. What they does negative swelling pressure. They create negative swelling pressure because one each other repulse each other, isn't it? So what the role of protein glycans? Protein glycans regulates the collagen fibril diameter. It's very important and maintain space between the fibrils. As I have already told, both repel each other. That's why it maintains the spacing between fibrils and essential for the corneal transparency. So what happens if we disrupt that regular arrangement? So loss of collagen organization increase the light scattering and decrease the transparency. For example, contact lens blocking oxygen, and whenever you block oxygen because of the anaerobic uh, pathway becomes dominance, then byproduct of anaerobic pathway is lactic acid accumulation. Whenever lactic acid accumulates, it will create the osmotic imbalance, and because of osmotic imbalance water influx is there, and because of water influx stromal edema is there. Stromal edema especially in the posterior stroma. Why? Because anterior stroma is way compact, posterior stroma is way looser. That's why you will see edema on the posterior side of the stroma, and the consequences is reduced transparency. Okay, that's the concept. I think it's way long video. It's like 37, 38 minutes. Yes, these are the references. I have taken reference from Nathan Ephron, one of the favorite book, and obviously Cornea by Manis MJ, which is also a very good book. I think that's all. This done. Cheers.